morning and welcome to Ventura Missionary Church. My name is Brian, and I am thrilled that you're here this morning. Yesterday morning, I came up here about 11 o'clock to put some finishing touches on the sermon. As I did, and it was about 11, there were 6 men walking out of the building, and they were just covered in what looked like white paint. And I said, what are y'all doing this morning? They said, well, we know that there's some renovations going on for children's rooms and the school and so forth. And we knew that the Family Life Department wanted the ceiling scraped in room 326. And so we just decided to come in this morning and scrape the ceiling for you so we didn't have to pay anybody to do that. We'll just take care of it. And I thought, that's why I love this church. That's why I love this place. No one had asked them specifically. We could have paid somebody to do that. The bills are fine. But we could have paid somebody to wash feet too. But Jesus took a towel and showed us who we are. So to those 5 men who reminded me yesterday that this is who we are, thank you. I'm so grateful. If you don't serve here, absolutely. If you consider Ventura Missionary Church your home, I would invite you to go out to the Connection Center right after the service and say, I just want to serve somewhere. We have need currently in children's department. We have need in student ministry department. We have need in small groups. Some of these opportunities are weekly, where you can serve in a service and then go to a service. Some of these opportunities are monthly, where you can just say, one Sunday a month, I'm going to be with the children or go to a summer camp. So go to the Connection Center. Tell them you want to get more invested in making something beautiful and compelling here at VMC. I just want to pray for our volunteers, and then we'll dig into God's word, all right? Father God, for those who week in and week out go to a 40 to 50 hour a week job, have children and partners or the craziness that the rest of us have, and yet continue to serve in this place. Show up early, put on a name badge and work a computer, hand out coffee, clean toys, set up rooms, vacuum floors. God, these people look a whole lot like you. So I pray that we would continue to be burdened to not just give of the monies you've entrusted to us, God, but also the time and the talents. Remind us, Lord, that it is the people who receive a paycheck that are called to equip the saints to do the work. So God, may we be people who are just jumping up saying, how can I serve? What do you need? How can I help? That we would look more and more like your son, Jesus. Thank you that this church has a history of that these people are those kind of people. We love you, God. We love you more because we see you in them and in the service all the time. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. REM, David Crowder, DC Talk, Audio Adrenaline, Avalon, Point of Grace, Carmen, Garth Brooks, Martina McBride, Kanye, Britney Spears, Chance the Rapper, Kenny G, Damian Rice, Brandy Carlisle, Ben Folds, Monsters and Men, Hanson, Ed Sheeran, Coldplay, Arcade Fire. But the concert that I stuck out the most was the Ramones. Now, for the music nerds in the room, you're going, but wait, the Ramones broke up in 96, to which you were right. But the longest tenured drummer of the Ramones, Marky Ramone, who's 190 years old, still tours with a variety of lead singers singing the band's greatest hits. And when Megan and I lived in Seattle, we went to hear Marky Ramone and the band play. I grew up, per my list, an early 90s youth group kid. I knew that love was a verb, but I didn't know what a mosh pit was. And so I'm in the balcony at this club in Seattle watching the Ramones, and I got an education. Now, if you don't know what a mosh pit is, I'm about to tell you. It's a form of extreme dancing, all right? So it's a group of people who bounce and kick off one another to aggressive music. What happens is when the music starts, someone towards the front of the room will yell some iconic words like, open up the pit. And everybody starts backing up so these extreme dancers can start bouncing and kicking and running around. Throughout the concert, The boundaries of the pit are dynamic. It gets larger or smaller based upon the needs of the dancers. We didn't do this at Avalon or Point of Grace concerts. This week, we continue our series in the book of 1 John. We'll turn to 1 John chapter 4, if you have your Bibles, 1 John chapter 4. Where we'll look today, John's going to tell us two things. One, these are the people you should be listening to. These are the people that you should give their opinions and their critiques and their criticism a lot of weight. The second thing he's going to say is this is how we love people. This is how we are to love people. And the case I'm going to build is that loving people like that looks a whole lot like the pit. That life is aggressive. And we're all trying to do the best we can. And the way we are called to love each other looks like giving people room. Looks like giving them space to figure out how to move to God's melody. Giving them margin and boundary. Back up, back up. This is where they're at right now. This is the best they can do right now. 1 John chapter 4. We're going to start in verse 1. If you've been with us, you know that this is a letter that John writes to his own church there in Ephesus, specifically addressing a church split or church schism. A number of people within the church started to preach a gospel that was not the gospel at all, denying that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, dead, buried, and raised again. And so they leave the church. And so he writes to those remaining within the church to say, way to go, you didn't fall to their deception, but let me continue to draw distinctions. This is who you are. This is who they are. The section we'll look at initially is interesting because it's sandwiched between two paragraphs that discusses loving people. And he's going to talk about discernment, what I think to be one of the most important conversations that the church should be having right now. I don't just mean VMC, I mean the evangelical church as a whole, how we make decisions. That if Jesus were walking in our shoes and living our lives, what would Jesus choose? How would he respond to my life? Discernment seems to be one of the most important conversations. And it's in the middle of a whole section on loving people, as though to say, love people, but make sure it's an informed love. John 4, 1 John 4, starting in verse 1. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. He's going to contrast those that have remained with those that have left. He says, make sure you discern the spirits. What's important is that this is not just the message they bring, but the messenger. Be cautious of over-spiritualizing this. It certainly does include the enemy, demonic forces, whatever you want to characterize those as. But don't miss that when he references messengers or spirits, he's specifically saying, you know who these people are. Sarah used to go here. She started denying that Jesus was the Son of God, and now she has left, and you didn't believe Sarah. Way to go. You know that Jack used to go here, and he said Jesus didn't really rise again. Way to go. You were able to discern that was heresy, that wasn't true. Make sure you continue to test the spirits, beloved. It's not just about the message, it's about the messenger. Understand the context here that John writes his letter and then he sends it to this house church. It becomes widely circulated because, unfortunately, these problems would persist for the first number of centuries of what is orthodoxy? What did the apostles tell us and teach us that we bought into? And so he writes the letter and then he sends it with an emissary or a courier to the house church. And this courier reads the letter. This is what John has to say. The problem is, there were a number of itinerant preachers and philosophers at the same time who would go to these house churches and want the same platform. They wanted to be heard with the same authority as John. And so John's going to say, I won't always be here. I want to give you a test, a litmus test, some lenses, a rubric against which to measure who you should listen to, who's speaking the truth. And the first is, make sure you test the spirits. Go back to verse 1. Dear friends, literally in the Greek it is beloved. Every time John uses this, it's to introduce a difficult thing he's about to say. Almost like when mom says, Brian, Allen, Rayburn. I know the next thing's going to be problematic for me. He says, beloved, Do not believe every spirit. Do not give credence. Do not give weight to every messenger, but test, search out, examine. In the Latin translation, Psalm 139, search me, O God, and know my heart is the same word. Search out and ask whether this is somebody who is to be believed. Test the spirits, because there are many false prophets that have gone out from our church, from our community, that have called themselves Christian, but don't really believe what we believe. Verse 2, this is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you've heard is coming and even now is already in the world. This is different than when Paul writes to the church in Corinth. He's focusing there on some theological specifics like speaking in tongues or prophecy or inerrancy and things of that nature. No, the problem here is not the rejection of Jesus, but the distortion of Jesus. That's not the Jesus we believed in the beginning. That's not the Jesus that the apostles taught us. That's not the Jesus we came to follow in the beginning. Hold to that truth. This will be the first of two tests John offers as to who we listen to. The first is, do they have God's purposes in mind for you? Do they have God's desire for you, God's heart for you? When I think about the people that I go to and say, will you pray with me about this? Will you offer me some insight? Will you give me some wisdom? I go to these people for comfort in moments that are difficult. Are they people for whom when they speak, I believe with all my heart and my gut, these are people who want more of Jesus for me. Make sure they have the intentions of God for you and have no other motives. Those are the people I want to go to and trust. Those are the people I want to listen to their advice. Paul says there are some who might even claim the name Christian who will offer you advice, critique, criticism. Weigh it, measure it. Make sure it's somebody whose greatest desire is God and his life in abundance for you. Don't listen to anybody else. Verse 4. You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. It says you've already overcome. Remember, again, one of our greatest dangers to over-spiritualize this. He says, you've overcome now. You didn't buy into their deception. You didn't listen to Sarah. You didn't listen to Jack or John. You stuck with orthodoxy. You stuck with what the apostles taught us. You stuck with what we hold as scripture. You didn't believe him, you've overcome. Verse 5. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world. And the world listens to them. We are from God, though. And whoever knows God listens to us. To us. But whoever's not from God does not listen to us. This is how we recognize the spirit of truth and the spirit of falsehood. Listening is not just giving an ear, but it's hearing with agreement. It's hearing and giving weight or credence to what they say. That ultimately, the second test of who we should listen to is who listens to them, who trusts them, who agrees with them. The two tests of the opinions we should give weight to are, one, do they have God's purposes in mind for you? Is there a desire that you would grow, that you would know God's heart, and you would discover God's will for your life? Two, who trusts them? Maybe another way to put it is, don't take advice from somebody you don't want to turn out like. Don't take advice from somebody you don't want to turn out like. Brene Brown says that the number of people I care about their opinion, their names could fit on a 1-inch by 1-inch sticky note. Now, I don't know how big she writes, but that's not a lot of names. Who gets to be on your sticky note? Whose weight and opinion about your decisions and choices gets to matter. They better be somebody who desires God's best and God's will for your life, for your family. And it better be somebody that's trusted by the community. If Lynn Bova or Eddie Everhart knocked on my door and said, Brian, we need to talk, and said, I think your marriage is in danger. I think the way you're raising your kids is wrong. I think you may be about to lose your ministry. I'm going to take those words with a lot of gravity, not only because I trust those people, but because people I trust those people. There's a larger group of people, though, that would come and say something similar, and I would listen lovingly and carefully. And then when they walk out my door, I'd sit down in my prayer closet and say, God, if this is from you, bring it back around. God, if this is from you, tell me again through somebody else. I'd listen to it and hear it in a different way because I believe with all my heart that there are people who desire God's best for me and my family, and they're trusted by people I trust. Are the people you're listening to, do they meet those criteria? In a moment, John is going to turn us back to how we love people. But before we leave this section, I do want to offer you 3 quick questions that I have found helpful in my own moments and seasons of discernment. I'd encourage you to write them down so the next time you end up at a decision or at a moment where you need to discern, should I leave this job or should I stay? Should I date him? Should I date her? Should we get married? What should we do with this financial deficit? What should we do with this financial windfall? Should we move? Should we stay? These are the things we're attempting to discern, how we raise our children, where we send our kids to school, things like that. I want to offer you 3 questions that I have found to be helpful in my own life. Here's the first one. Is there a decision to be made? Is there a decision to be made? Do I need to say yes or no? Do I need to go forward or go backwards? Let's make sure there's a decision to be made. The second question determines a lot, though, and that is, am I the person to make that decision? Because there are a lot of things I care about that I'm not the decider. There are a lot of things that I am passionate about or have an opinion about, because good Lord knows we all have an opinion about everything these days. But I'm not the person who gets to decide. That decision's made at a table that I'm not invited to. So the second question you have to ask yourself is not, is there just a decision to be made, but am I the person who gets to make the decision? Am I the person tasked with deciding? Am I the person with the influence, the authority, whatever it is, to make that decision? And how you answer number 2 determines what your third question is. If you are the person to make that decision, if it is at your table, then you need to find somebody or begin asking the question, who should be processing this with me? Who is that person that I can say, would you just begin praying for our family? Would you begin searching the scriptures so that before we make this decision, you and I can sit down, or this group can sit down, and we can say, this is what I'm hearing from God. This is what I think God is saying. Does it agree with scripture? Does it seem like Jesus? I want to know who should be processing this with me if it is my decision. And if it's not my decision, who should I be praying for? Who should I be praying for? I don't get to make that decision. I care about it. I'm vested. I have an opinion about it, but I don't get to make that decision. So who should I be praying for that does get to make that decision? And how should I be asking God to prepare me for the outcome of their decision? I find this helpful not to get to the end of discernment, but at least to begin the process. Is there a decision to be made? Yes. Is it mine to make? Yes. Then I need to invite somebody who's trusted, whose voice I give weight to, who's on my sticky note, into that process of asking God what he would have us do. Let's keep going. Verse 7. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This will be the 3rd time that John tells us love is proof of genuine belief. Love is proof of genuine faith. God is love. It is interesting also that anytime I offer an opinion, counsel, comfort, anytime you offer an opinion, counsel, comfort, critique, criticism, you better be able to defend it by love. You better be able to defend it by love. This does not mean we approve of all things. I still have to tell my 3-year-old that he's had too much screen time and to turn the Kindle off, right? He cries and he wails and he falls on the ground. But it's not love to say yes all the time. That's not love to condone everything. But I better be able to defend my response as love. Some of you in this room, I was thinking about this as I was driving in this morning, have already run way ahead of me. and started going, but Brian, does that mean we condone everything? Does that mean we just never, does it mean we never call people up or challenge people or things like that? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is before you're the person to really confront, before you're the person to really come and say, we need to talk about these things, make sure, one, you're the right person, and two, make sure you have loved well enough to earn that spot in their life. Make sure you know them well enough and you're the person in their life that's invested in them and love them well enough to say hard things. Part of the problem becomes when I just have an opinion about what you're doing, and we don't know each other, we don't have relational time in, we don't have relational collateral, but I sure can tell you what you're doing wrong. No, I don't think it means we condone everything. I don't think it means we should let everything go, but I do want to make sure I'm the right person to say it, and I do want to make sure it's said in a way that you know I love you. You know I'm for you. You know I don't want anything but the best, God's will, and more of Jesus for you. And because of that, because you're convinced of that, because of our relationship, I'm going to say something hard. Verse 9, this is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. John moves from the abstract to the concrete. He says, you know the kind of love I'm talking about. You know the kind of love I'm encouraging because you've seen it. You've experienced among us. You've been loved by people in this church in a self-sacrificing, relief-giving, redemptive way. Go and offer that love to other people. It's the quality of your love that is demanded of us. Go love people the way you've been loved. Verse 11, dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us and his love is made complete in us. His love is made complete in us. What lacks in God's love? What lacks in God's love that it would be made complete in us? What lacks is its intended recipient. You are not the end recipient of God's love. Your neighbor is. And so when you receive God's love and hoard it to yourself, it remains incomplete because you were never the terminus of it. You were never the end goal of it. Your neighbor was. You're a conduit of love. It remains incomplete, not because anything on God's end is incomplete, but because you hoarded it and it doesn't help. It's incomplete because we don't continue to give that same love away to everybody else. Its intended recipient was not just you, it was your neighbor. And that's what remains incomplete. You've received this love, but you haven't given it to anybody. You're not regularly giving it to people. When Megan and I lived in the Pacific Northwest, our best friends were John and Amy. And John and Amy were preparing to go to the mission field and now serve in South Sudan doing water projects and sharing the gospel. Every Thursday night, we'd go over to their house after they put their kids down. We didn't have kids at the time. And we would just pray and talk about, how was your week? What can we pray for you about? And then just pray for a couple hours together. And so when the time finally came for them to leave for Africa, it was really hard on us. And they were dear, dear friends. John is an engineer by training. He used to work at Weyerhaeuser. And so an engineer, if you know an engineer, their garage is just next level. Like the amount of tools and things they have are just, wait, what? And so John's headed to the mission field, and he can't take stuff like that with him. So he said, do you want my tools? And I'm like, yeah, I want your tools. Of course I want your tools. And so, which you laugh if you know me, because what do you know to do with tools? This is why they didn't call me to scrape the ceiling. They're like, it's more trouble than it's worth. So he said, I'll come over on Saturday and bring my tools. I said, great, no problem. So he backs up 2 trucks of tools. It looks like a NASCAR pit. Like there's just racks and racks. It's like I'm going through, I'm like, ooh, I don't know what any of this does. This is awesome. So John goes to the mission field. He's there about 2 years and then comes back on furlough and calls when he gets back and is like, hey man, can I come and get my tools? I'm going to be here for a year or so. And I'm going to be working on some projects. I said, sure. So he comes over and he starts looking through them and he's like, man, did you ever use this? And I was like, no, man, I don't even know what that does. He's like, did you see this in here? And it's like the random obscure tools that like, the only thing that tool does is replace a spark plug in a 1960 Fiat. There's nothing else that tool does. And he owns it. And he's like, did you see this? It's like a diamond cutting in girder blade thing. And I'm like, no, man, I don't even know what to do with that. He's like, did you use any of my tools in the 2 years I was gone? I was like, your red hammer. Megan wanted some pictures on the wall, and I hung with the red hammer. I pretty could have made like a nuclear reactor with what he gave me. I hung pictures. Because even my wife puts together the IKEA stuff. Another story. The potential that existed in that garage that I never explored. The wealth of grace and mercy you've received that you do not continue to pass on. Think about the way you have felt when you've received grace and forgiveness and then hoarded it to yourself rather than extending it to other people. The potential that exists. C.H. Dodd, pastor and theologian, writes, the energy of God's love always discharges itself in the form of a triangle whose points are God, self, and neighbor. Where one leg of the triangle is missing, love remains incomplete and immature. What lacks in God's love? Only you passing it on. Verse 17. This is how love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world, we are like Jesus. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. This verse might be one of the most misquoted in Scripture next to Jeremiah 29:11. It does not mean because you're a Christian that you don't have fears and anxieties. I still fear cancer, poverty, and all Raiders fans. It means that in light of the salvation you found, you have no concern or fear or worry at the just judgment of God. You'll still have worries and anxieties, and we're encouraged to bring those to God, but you have no fear of Jesus' second return and his just judgment because you have come to know Jesus and the grace and mercy that he offers. So there's no fear there. So quit making pillows and beating your friends up with like, don't fear, you know perfect love drives out fear. Only about judgment. I know Jesus, and so I'm not fearful of his return. Verse 19. We love because he first loved us. Whoever claims to love God, yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. Whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God, whom they've not seen. And he has given us this command. Anyone who loves God must also love their brother and their sister. Don't miss the comparison there. To deny Jesus as the Son of God makes you a liar. And to call yourself a Christian and to not love your brother or sister also makes you a liar. He just compared Christians who don't love to heretics. Yikes. John Calvin writes, it is a false boast when anyone says he or she loves God, but neglects God's image, which is right before their eyes. I want to do you the same service that John seems to have done us and move from the abstract to the concrete. To say simply to love your neighbor, to convey God's love is just ethereal enough, just lofty enough that we'd say, okay, like love more. I want to offer you two ways that I think we can manifest this teaching, that we can bring about what we're talking about here, that we can flesh it out on Monday, on Tuesday. If you have notes, I'd invite you to write these down, and then you can pick them apart in your small groups and call me a heretic. Number one, someone said amen. I expect you to sign up to serve in children's ministry, sir. Number one, speak words of relief. Speak words of relief this week. Words of relief let people off the hook. Words of relief set people at ease. Words of relief convey to people that you were glad you were with them and receive them as they are, not as projects, not as disappointments, but beloved children of God. Speak words of relief. Here's some phrases I'm using more and more, trying to, no sweat. No sweat. When people let me down, when people disappoint me, when people don't show up after promise, hey, no sweat. There are a lot of things worth sweating, but most of the things we make a big argument and case for aren't. What would it feel like if more and more when people let us down, we say, hey, no sweat, I'll figure it out. God will take care of it. You know what? I have been extended so much grace by so many people. I know what no sweat looks like. No rush. We're all too busy. Overcommitted. I want my relationship with you to be an easy one, a life-giving one, not the type of relationship where you feel you need to jump through hoops. I lived in Hong Kong for a good chunk of my 20s as a missionary, and I discovered the cultural nuance of having to remove your shoes when you entered someone's home. I would later discover that that was not because of an obsession with cleanliness, but rather an expression in those countries of a care as we approached our time together. I want to approach my time with people like I'm removing my shoes, like I'm not just talking to them as I pass by on my way to another appointment, on my way to another thing. That people feel seen by me. And so when they come to our time together, coffee, dinner, a meeting, whatever it is, hey, don't worry about it. No rush. Let your hair down. I just want to be with you. I just want to hear from God in our time together. Words of relief often look like staying silent more. Staying silent more. The insecure need in us to defend ourselves in matters of very little weight seems to be anchored in an obsession to be right. I'll read that again because all of us need to hear it. The insecure need to defend ourselves in matters of very little weight seem to be anchored in an obsession to be right. There are some accusations or points worth debating. There are many more worth letting go. When you feel the temptation to respond, to defend, to counter, to act, you need to ask, why? What internal need or drive may I have to be right in this moment? Sometimes speaking words of relief just looks like staying silent. Okay, here's the last one that I want to wreck your prayer life this week with. Listen generously. Listen generously. This looks like love. This looks like the love we've been given. Ruth Harms Calkin, in her book, Tell Me Again, Lord, I Forgot, recounts an experience she had at a bus stop. She writes, I spoke to her at the bus stop, but she turned the other way. My immediate reaction, a rush of resentment. She's ignoring me. She doesn't really like me. I've always suspected that, but now I know. Suddenly, she looked towards me, startled but sincere. Forgive me, I didn't see you. Until then, I hadn't noticed the agony lining her face. A hesitant pause, a catch in her voice. I just came from the doctor's office. Our little boy has leukemia. It's a terrible nightmare. Lord, what loathsome selfishness. A mother stricken with grief, her heart soaked with pain, an hour of black catastrophe, and I thought only of me. Cleanse me, Lord, and sensitize me until my first concern is for others and my last concern is for me. How quick we are to criticize and critique without knowing the full story. It just rolls off our tongues. When we were with people this week, are you looking for virtue or flaw? Because both are present. And whatever you're looking for, you'll find. When I say listen generously, what I mean is I'm asking myself regularly, how can I make this person's loss my own? How can I make this person's anxiety or fear my own? Not to bear it myself, but so that they don't have to bear it alone. So they don't have to bear it alone. I want to listen to people in a way that conveys to them your pain and your hurt and your loss. It's important to me. It matters to me. When I was in 8th grade, I was a an office worker. That was probably due to the fact that in 7th grade, I was in the office all the time. So in 8th grade, they just decided, like, we need to keep this kid busy during his off hour. And so I worked in the office taking copies and packages and things just all over campus to teachers. Our hallways at the school were tightly policed even back then. And as an aside, this is not in my notes at all. The year before, I was in charge of hanging the American flag, and I accidentally put it upside down. And so if you know, that means like a fort is under attack or in distress. And so the police called the school, and I got in so much trouble for hanging the sign upside down, or the American flag upside down. Another story. All right, another story. The halls were tightly policed. And so there were hall monitors. So when you were in the hall, they were always saying, hey, where's your hall pass? Where's your hall pass? Do you have a hall pass? Let me see your hall pass. And it was this big badge. It just had hall pass that you'd wear when you were running papers or packages around the building. Teacher would pop their heads at, hey, where's your hall pass? Got a hall pass? This week, I want to invite you to see yourself not as policing hallways, but giving away hall passes. Making room for people to be where they're at. Because everybody's trying the best they can. We're all trying to learn to dance to God's melody, and we just need space because the world is aggressive. And we're all bouncing off of and ricocheting off of hurt and tragedy and pain and suffering and mental illness and depression and loss. And so maybe the best way we can love this week is just to give people a little bit more room. I think it looks like Jesus. Will you pray with me? Would you take a second with your eyes closed? I just want you to consider that there's somebody in your life right now that you need to give a hall pass to. Maybe they live in your home. Maybe they are a family member. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's one of your kids. Maybe it's an in-law, outlaw, whatever. And they're just annoying the far out of you. They did something that legitimately hurt your feelings. It legitimately was mean-spirited or was disrespectful or just wasn't honoring to you in a way. And I want to invite you to reach down really deep and just give them a hall pass. Because everybody's struggling a little bit more than you know. And last, I want you to just ask the Lord in this moment to prepare your heart to give away hall passes this week. That's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen on Tuesday. It's going to happen on Wednesday. It'll happen in an hour and a half when you're trying to put kids down to a nap. And just ask God to bring this to mind. That your love in that moment, your hall pass would look like the love you have received. Redemptive, relieving, life-giving. Oh, Father God, all that lacks in your love is our willingness to pass it on. Our willingness to give people the grace and understanding and mercy and long suffering you continue to offer us. May we make room for people who are not at their best, because most days we are not at our best. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.